As soon as Darrell sighted the turquoise brick colossus that was Mendota's Market, he wondered if the gas station clerk's assurance about the dramatic drop in transactions at that establishment during basketball games had been more of a sarcastic slight against his former employer than an honest description of the organized insanity that confronted him. It seemed like every vehicle in Madison was crammed into the store's parking lot, and a fourth of these were lined up at the parcel pickup, which was staffed by two extremely harried-looking college-aged clerks struggling to maintain Mendota's impeccable standards of customer service and efficiency in spite of the dissonant chorus of impatient car horns naggingly insisting that their frostbitten fingers and frazzled minds weren't moving rapidly enough to keep Badger Nation from missing the most important game of the season. The only available parking space was in the alley next to a discarded cart caddy. "If I'm not back here in 10 minutes, I'll call you," Darrell informed his wife as he parked the car. "When the phone rings, don't answer it. Just grab the ear and have it open the book to whatever spell will destroy the illusion that's delaying my return." "For God's sake, be careful," Denise warned him as he got out of the vehicle. "Don't worry, hon," Darrell assured her. "After what happened at the Antique Nook, I'm ready for anything." The first thing Darrell noticed as he walked into the store was the 5-foot-wide placard over the entrance to the tobacco display, which spelled out in forbidding black capital lettering, "Restricted Area," and the padlocked metal gate. At first, he surmised that there was no way in hell he'd be able to scale that gate unnoticed until he observed that 9 out of the 10 customers standing in the express lane adjoining the tobacco were either engrossed in cell phone chatter or trying to placate wailing infants. The sole customer without a baby or a phone was an emaciated-looking high school girl with stringy orange curls who was engaged in a shrill, sporadically profane argument with the cashier, a sheepish, spectacled guy in his late teens, about his refusal to allow her to purchase lemonade with a WIC check that could only be used for juice. A half-minute later, the manager, an athletically built 30-something with greasy black curls and a pug nose, emerged from his office at the back of the store and sprinted over to the express lane in response to the cashier's exasperated summons. As he tried his best to convince the belligerent young woman to return to the aisles and select a container of juice without antagonizing her further, Darrell seized the opportunity to slip past the manager and his employee and climb over the gate. After what he had been forced to contend with at the Antique Nook, he was pleasantly surprised that he only had to remove a dozen boxes of cigars from the bottom shelf, none of which concealed any spiders, before he located the second ear. He hurriedly stashed it in his back pocket without provoking so much as a suspicious glance from either the cashier or his boss. Darrell was halfway out the door when he felt a powerful right hand seize his back collar and turn him around. "All right, sir. Hand over those cigars right now, and maybe I won't call the cops," snarled the manager with malicious condescension. "What cigars?" asked Darrell. "The ones I saw you stuff in your pocket, sir." His usage of the word "sir" was so bloated with contempt he might as well have been addressing Darrell as shithead or boy. "I have no idea what you're talking about," insisted Darrell. "Then what the hell is this?" the manager demanded as he removed a pack of Phillies from Darrell's back pocket with a triumphant flourish and shoved it in his face. "A bottle of malt liquor? I guess I forgot to pay for those," stammered Darrell, who couldn't think of any other alibi that would conform to the manager's standards of rationality. "I'll get in line right now and—" "The only place you're going is my office to wait for the cops," the manager interjected as he escorted his captive back inside. If this was a normal case of profiling, it would have been as easy as picking up the phone and calling the NAACP to push that racist bastard into the pyramid of Aunt Jemima pancake mixes next to the service desk and dash out the door before the redneck had a chance to pull his flour-spattered carcass off the floor, especially since the two assistant managers were working registers. But by now it was glaringly obvious that this was no ordinary miscarriage of supermarket justice, because those cigars hadn't been planted in Daryl's pocket by human hands. As they entered the stockroom, a chubby, blonde-haired 16-year-old was seated on the edge of the compactor set into the back wall of the frigid, dimly lit space, unsuccessfully trying to enjam the machine with his size 13s. "Stay right there, asshole," the manager warned Daryl before letting go of his collar and storming over to the compactor. "God damn it, Craig, how many times have I told you to use the stick?" demanded the manager as he seized the 2x4 leaning up against the wall next to the compactor and held it a few inches above the boy's head. "I dunno," replied the kid absently. "At least a dozen times since I was stupid enough to hire you. Now get the hell out of there before you chop your fat legs off." The kid cursed his superior under his breath as he climbed out of the machine. He reached for the 2x4, but instead of handing it to him, the manager brought the heavy piece of wood down on the summit of the teen's head with just enough force to knock him out. "That was completely uncalled for," protested Daryl. "When the police show up, they'll be hauling you away for assaulting a minor instead of arresting me for a crime I didn't commit." "Shut your black ass up or I'll be delivering both you and Porky to the cops in body bags," the manager snapped back as he reached into the compactor and began flinging its dented cardboard contents onto the stockroom floor. Daryl suppressed an urge to lunge at this specimen of bigoted brutality and beat him to death with a 2x4, not only because a murder rap would be devastating to his family, but because he was becoming increasingly suspicious of the manager's humanity. It just didn't make sense for him to be tossing every box in that compactor onto the floor instead of taking out just enough to allow the machine to operate properly. When the machine was completely empty, the manager stood in front of it, raised his arms over his head, and shouted in a voice that seemed to come from the compactor's rusty metallic maw, "Esserop Rafet Nick Lupus!" Daryl, who was now undeniably convinced that the manager was a Knickknackian, whipped out his phone to call Denise. His forefinger was on the 2 button, which corresponded to his wife's speed dial number, when the device flew out of his hand and clattered to the floor. Daryl hoped to God that the phone, which had landed face down, had automatically dialed Denise's number as soon as it hit the cement, especially since he was now levitating towards the compactor. As he gravitated into the machine, he grasped the door handle and hung onto it with every atom of willpower in his body, praying that he be able to resist the demonic power that was determined to drag him to a demise more hellish than the steel jaws gnashing anticipatorily at his flailing legs long enough for the first ear to open the book to the incantation that would eliminate one of the deadliest impediments he'd encountered yet. He wondered why the Knickknackian was just standing in front of the compactor with its arms folded, staring at him with almost sepulchral indifference. Then he realized that the harder he clung to that handle, the more he became aware of a terrifyingly familiar green glow emanating from a large chasm just beyond the compactor's fangs, which as the glow increased in luminosity grew lethargic, and as soon as that unholy light was almost intense enough to roast Daryl's pupils, ceased their ravenous clinking forever. The final clunk of the compactor's blades was succeeded by a sound 10 times as sinister, the soul-sundering howl of the Gigantolupus, which caused a pseudo-cyclonic gust of wind to billow up from the abyss and slam the door shut, almost causing Daryl to let go of the handle, which as the unearthly gale buffeted him from every direction became increasingly hotter.